following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health. Use my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. This week, we're talking money trauma and money and trauma, some combination of money and or trauma because, well, okay, it's impossible to avoid the news lately, right? Every day, it's some new headline about some financial chaos, and I'm not even going to give examples because it may have changed between, like, now and the last time I looked a half hour ago. So I've got an expert on money management, Natasha Janssens, on for the interview later. But first, let's unpack our internal financial screaming. Money stress cuts deep. That's an understatement because, well, we need money to live. But success is also connected to our self-esteem, our identity. So sudden shocks, losses in investments, having to take a job that earns less money, changes in financial circumstances, or even income bracket. These things can really hit us hard in the proverbial squishy bits. And, I can hear those of you who don't have investment portfolios protesting that you're having trouble even paying your bills. And I hear you. Like I said from the start, this stuff cuts deep. I can't think of anything more personal to talk about. Money insecurity might be more difficult to talk about for some people than sex. But for, some people, money goes beyond stress. It goes beyond embarrassment into full-blown trauma. Financial abuse is a thing, for one. Economic abuse is something that is, somewhat widespread. You'll hear things about, elder abuse. But, it happens in domestic relationships, even among friends, taking advantage of, your good nature. A lot of people like me who didn't grow up with much money have had a very bumpy relationship with the stuff. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of pain, a lot of mistakes to change your relationship with money. Certain things about money still freaks me out. I went shopping recently, okay? It was the Bay closing, the sale, right? It's like, okay, saved a lot of money, but spent a lot of money too. I haven't really bought proper clothes. Like, I haven't updated my wardrobe since COVID. Like, since before COVID. So it's like 6 years old, right? And it, without fail, whenever I spend money on clothes, guaranteed I'm going to get hit with an unexpected emergency expense. I don't go, oh my God, it's going to happen. But every single time, like, I don't even believe in this stuff. It's like, why? What did I do this time? I scratched my glasses. And my glasses are freaking expensive. So I just lost my ish. Lost it. Right? Now, apparently, they're under warranty. And God, because I can't afford it. I envy those people who can go and get like the $99 glasses. No, my prescription is too complicated. And I'm for sure they're under warranty. I'm hoping, right? I can't afford to replace these things, but I need to replace them. I see the stupid scratches all the time. But, I mean, this is simple compared to stuff like real estate, investments, retirement planning. I wasn't raised with awareness of any of this stuff. It was just get a job with benefits. And the job with benefits world, I mean, good luck with that. That world's shrinking. In some sectors, it's gone. And I'm finding myself now sponsoring events, doing charity fundraisers. I have moments of, who is this person? What is my life? It's so easy to just be cheap and hide in that mantra of can't afford it, right? You hear that? It drives me crazy. People in these 3,000 foot, like square foot homes in the suburbs, all those ridings that flipped conservative the last election, they're in these giant homes and can't afford it. They proudly say can't afford it because, well, they really can. They just don't want to. It feels tough to go, I can't afford that, right? But the flip side of that, the reason they're living in these big homes and going, can't afford it, is we live in an image-obsessed culture where how you look, where you live, how big your house is, possibly matters more than what you know or how hard you work. But you also have to spend money to make money. That is true. But there are a ton of scams out there these days. And learning as you go, the way I did when it comes to money management, is terrifying. And the tough times, they mark you. And I know I'm doing a lot better than a lot of people are these days. So I don't want to make this about me, because everyone's pain on this topic is, like I said, so deeply personal. There's so much raw out there these days. It's okay to want better for yourself, but it's also okay to not be where you wanted to be, because the world blew up, then fell apart, then blew up again, and it's landed especially bad on Generation Z. If you think you need it, it's absolutely okay to ask for help with money things. In fact, a financial advisor is a good person to connect with sooner as opposed to later. Not sure what a financial advisor does? Well, I brought one on as a guest. Natasha Janssens will join us after the break to discuss how trauma affects your relationship with money. It's going to be great. I love it. Do you have a story you think would be a good idea for the show? Are you interested in sponsoring the show? Sponsor money. See, I ask. Oh, that guts me every time I do it. So weird. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is my website. At nottherapyshow on socials. We'll be back. Money, trauma, trauma, money after this on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kursner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking trauma and money. And it is the interview this week. As I said off the top, we have Natasha Janssens, finance expert, founder of Women with Sense, and the author of the book, I love this title, Wonder Woman's Guide to Money, The Busy Woman's Guide to Money Management and Wealth Building. Natasha, thanks for coming on It's Not Therapy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Awesome. I am too, because I mean, this is a big topic, right? And obviously everybody has some triggers when it comes to money. Now, you came at it from very personal experience. You've been through a lot in your life. So how did you initially become interested in the idea of early life trauma or adverse childhood experiences and money habits?
It was a real evolution for me, actually. So I grew up in Eastern Europe. So up until the age of 18, really war, poverty, economic instability, that was the reality. That was all I knew. And it was always my dream to one day move to some place like Australia, which I finally one day managed to succeed at when I was 18 years old. And so from there, I kind of really fell into the land of accountancy, and from there, financial planning, mortgage broking. I really wanted to understand everything that there was to do with money, because I noticed, even growing up in Serbia, that sort of seemed to be like those who understood all these systems and how things worked that sort of managed to do better. So I set out to sort of understand as much as I could about it. And then I wanted to share that knowledge and help others around me. And so working as a financial planner, what I began to realize is that, as much as I tried, I'd put together plans for people, I wrote a book, I ran webinars, I did everything I could. Many people still weren't creating any real change in their lives. They'd have a plan, but they just wouldn't stick to it, or it would go off the rails quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that then got me interested into why was that happening? So I then, opened the Pandora's box of economic psychology and looking at behavioral finance and what is it that drives our behaviors. And the more I started to work in this space as a money therapist and a money coach, I began to notice that common thread of just how much our childhoods impact the way we view ourselves, the way we view the world around us, and the way we view our relationship with money and the habits that formed from that. And so, yeah, that's sort of how it came to be. It certainly wasn't something that I set out to do from the get-go, but just the more I learnt about it, the more I realized this is sort of the part that we really need most focus on.
Yeah, because you've connected it to attachment styles, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So looking at it from a few different angles, but certainly our attachment styles also play a part in that because really looking at the way that we bond with others and the way that we deal with the relationships around us and the way that we cope with stress, all of that translates to how we use money because we use money to self-soothe, right? So all
Right.
of that ends up being interconnected.
Right. And I mean, financial avoidance is an obvious one, right? Like people just, that's too big, so I'm not going to look at it and they get into trouble. The debt piles up. Impulse spending, how does that connect to attachment? Would that like connected to anxious attachment?
Look, what I've found is that impulse spending takes place when any emotion gets too much.
Okay.
Okay, so that could be that anxiety and the overwhelm. So then we make an impulsive decision just to make that anxiety go away. I just want to be done with that.
Right.
It could be, anger. It could be sadness, frustration, feeling powerless, any number of things. But the impulsiveness comes when those emotions are just too much for us and we just get reactive. And then how we get reactive, that then depends on what were the other habits that we formed. How did we learn to cope with certain situations? So for some people, we might end up, uh, if we're an avoidant, if we want to escape, we might then book a holiday. It's like, I just need to get myself out of this situation. I just want to
Right.
be done with it, right? If we're there and our focus is around people pleasing, we might compensate over overdoing things for others and just sort of wanting to gain that acceptance. So it can play out in any number of different ways.
And shame figures heavily in how people spend money, right? I mean, I know my own upbringing, there was this fear of debt in my family. And obviously, you can't grow wealth without taking on some debt. I mean, a mortgage is debt, but it's the sort of debt that actually works for you.
Mm.
Sometimes this was a big change in my thinking that sometimes it's better to take on debt than spend money you have based on interest rates and a whole bunch of very complicated factors. This is why we have financial planners, money managers, and so on. But the psychology of taking on debt is definitely something I had to learn. So, for people who might not have grown up with much, who's sort of the idea of debt is very scary, the idea of having five-figure debt is even scarier. I mean, now it's six-figure debt to afford a house. How do you start with somebody where it isn't just unease, it's trauma?
Yeah, yeah. Look, it starts off, and regardless of what their challenge is, whether it's around debt or around something else, the approach that I found to be most effective is we start, first of all, by looking backwards. So I'll typically get clients to write down like a chronological biography, looking at it through a little bit of a lens through finances. But money overlaps so many things. So we start to look through what were their life experiences, what were the emotions that were attached to those particular memories. And then we start to notice trends and patterns and belief systems that started to form.
Hmm.
So you really, in order to shift something around shame or around fear of having debt or whatever it might be, we need to understand where that fear stems from and what is it really about. Has something happened in the past that made you think that, okay, if I go and take on this debt, then there's going to be a series of negative events that will take
Right.
place? Did you observe someone going through it? Were there times in your life where people just told you that nothing will ever come of you? You won't be able to succeed in what you set out. And
Hmm.
maybe that fear is then that going, do I actually have what it takes to succeed in this plan that I have set out? So we need to have that context and understanding to what it's about and when it comes from. Then you can start to challenge those beliefs because you can go, oh, well, based on that situation, well, was that really that might be one story that I made to make sense of the situation as to this is what this means. But are there different ways to look at it? And one way that can be really powerful to shift someone's thinking is I say to them, change the bio because you have your name sitting there at the top. So put the name of someone that you really admire. Like maybe it's Oprah, maybe it's a friend, maybe whoever. Put a name of someone you admire and read that again, and you'll notice just how much differently you view all those experiences that this person had overcome. Suddenly they weren't being foolish or irresponsible or whatever it is. Suddenly they're, oh my gosh, they're resourceful. They've had all these challenges
Hmm.
come their way and look, they've managed to go and succeed and they've tried again and picked themselves up and all of that. So starting to look at it from a few different ways, we start to smash that thinking. Once we start to introduce a little bit of seed of doubt to a belief system, it becomes easier to let it go.
Now, the other thing with women uniquely is that idea of risk and threat. We're trained by society to just stay safe. And that has a negative impact when it comes to, as somebody who started multiple businesses, some of them worked, some of them didn't. That idea of taking a risk and possibly be wrong, that's sort of existential for women, right? Because the way we're trained by society. How do you teach calculated risk or healthy risk as opposed to just what some people do and just throw the doors off and start being reckless and finding out the hard way? That's not good either.
Yeah. So, and look, that's a really interesting point because we actually have a really strong fear response around money, both men and women, because money at its core is attached to our survival. It's how you get food and shelter.
Right.
So we'll automatically have a really strong fear response to anything that takes us out of our comfort zones. Then you start to overlay those natural instincts with what you just mentioned, which is societal conditioning as well,
Mhm.
as to what are you capable of, best that you play it safe and sort of do X, Y, and Z. So the way that I would address that is by, first of all, you want to start taking small steps of practicing imperfection and practicing risk. And that can be in areas that aren't related to money. I've said to clients, I'll often give people tasks as far as doing a little bit of creativity. I find that as we become older, we sort of lose that creative part of ourselves. And a common objection is, well, I'm not a good artist and I don't know how to draw well. So we go, let's practice imperfection. Doesn't matter. Practice drawing something badly, right? Go
Mhm.
draw, take a coloring in book and draw outside of the lines, right? And do
Mhm.
it messy. Just getting used to that whole thing around it doesn't have to be perfect. That's a big thing for women as well. We're sort of conditioned that it all has to be perfect. And then we translate that to investments, right? It has to be the perfect investment.
Right.
But there's no such thing as a
No.
perfect investment, right?
Mhm.
So we need to get comfortable at being imperfect. Then we look at, okay, if there's an investment that I'm wanting to take, let's look at how much risk can I afford to take? Like from a financial perspective, how much can I afford to risk? But also from an emotional perspective, what is it that I need in order to feel safe? Do I need
Right.
to have a certain amount saved up? Do I need to say, well, I'm only going to put this portion with this investment? Do I need to research it a little bit more? Right. And then we sort of go and start to take those little baby steps. But yeah, coming at it from a few different angles ends up being the key to really shifting that.
Yeah, there's a reality of it's just expensive to be a woman too, with influencers like on Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. It's really easy to throw a lot of money at, one-click purchases and not plan. Because I mean, there is so much pressure when somebody's got a $20,000 face and you're comparing yourself to that online. Money can sort of disappear shockingly quickly. And does that tie into your idea of practicing in perfection that, hey, that is a priority for that person? It's not a priority for me, and I'm allowed to have my priorities?
Absolutely. So getting comfortable with running your own race, which is really challenging now when we have social media in our face. I mean, we're naturally wired to want to fit in and do what everyone else is doing, but it's just exploded, right? With social media
Oh,
everywhere, and
yeah.
it's all that perfection. It's all perfectly curated. So, yeah, giving yourself permission to run your own race, getting curious around what it is that's making me feel like I'm not enough unless I have hair that looks like this, or unless I have the perfect nails, or whatever it might be. Because again, when we look at it as far as from a gendered lens, men have been trained that it's their job to provide and to protect. So they're being conditioned to be comfortable with risk taking. And for women and for girls, I look at my daughter who's 8 years old and already, and even though she doesn't have her own phone and access to social media, they're still getting to her as far as constant feeding of you need these perfect nails, and that all comes at a cost, right? So we then look at how much time do we as women spend on making ourselves look perfect. That could be time I could be spending researching investments, starting a business. Instead, I'm spending an hour before I've even gotten out the door on my appearance. Then we add to that how much money are we putting towards achieving that look. Whereas I could take a fraction of that money and put it towards something else. So I used to say, to women, and this would sort of trigger investors because when you're a pure investor, you want to reduce the cost of the investment. You want to reduce your brokerage fees and all those
Right.
sorts of things. But I'm looking at it from a perspective of I just want you to shift your habits. So I used to
Mm-hmm.
say to women, I'm like, go, if you have that $50 that you were going to spend on a handbag or a nails or whatever, go and just buy a share. Buy whatever you can with that $50. Just go. And so the investors would lose their minds because you've now spent an extra 10 or $20 in brokerage on top of it. But I'm going, but you would have spent that money anyway on a handbag that you weren't going to use. You go and buy those shares, you're learning something. You're now watching that money grow, or you're getting the experience of the volatility. That's still an investment in yourself in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, really starting to question everything that we have been taught because we're at a disadvantage at the moment in that technology is so powerful at exploiting our natural instincts and vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be taught and practice and train how to disconnect from that and to go, okay, this machine knows how to get to me. It knows now when I'm having a bad day, it knows, oh, hey, maybe this little thing will perk you up to actually go back and go, actually, what is my bad day about? Let's connect back with me. What do I really feel right now? I've worked with so many clients who, for example, loneliness and disconnect is a
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's growing. And I say, well, if that's what I'm feeling right now, and I take the time to observe that, then once I've acknowledged it, I'll go and pick up the phone, right? I'll go for
Right.
a walk with a friend. I'll actually meet that need in a way that will actually heal me long term, as opposed to that impulse purchase that will have a fleeting sort of experience of joy. And then I'll
Mm-hmm.
be back to the state where I was. So again, starting to disconnect from technology, from social media, and tune back into ourselves, into our bodies, and noticing what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I truly need right now? And that'll then start to pave that way towards running your own race as well.
On the subject of your own needs versus other people's needs, I want to talk about money relationships. But first, I want to go to break. Everybody, Natasha Janssens, finance expert, founder of Women with Sense, author of Wonder Woman's Guide to Money. Love that title. We are talking about early life financial habits, relationships, all that good stuff. More on that when we come back on It's Not Therapy. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com, website with the contact form, at Not Therapy Show on social media. Back in a bit. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're talking trauma, money, life, everything with Natasha Janssens, finance expert, finance coach, founder of Women with Sense, CENTS, and the author of Wonder Woman's Guide to Money. Now, Natasha, I teased before the break that we're going to talk about relationships and money because nothing tests any relationship like money. I've been married for 25 years, so been through quite a bit. My husband and I have very, very different money habits, and it clashes sometimes. But I've also seen a lot of families torn apart by things like inheritance. People get ugly when it comes to money. Big question, but where do we start going, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah, well, look, if you're in a relationship, I think taking the time to get to know, first of all, yourselves and your own relationship with money and reflecting on that past, and then having a chat with each other and even with your kids, what was life like growing up and starting to look at and What is the meaning that you took away from all of this? So it's one thing to look at, oh, these are the things. Oh, my father used to always say money doesn't grow on trees or where it is. But what is the meaning that you took away from it?
Right.
Because it's more that that'll affect than what you went and did as a result of it. So starting to understand each other and coming at it from a place of compassion, because the reason why money is such a trigger in relationship is because money is tied so closely to our sense of self-worth
Hmm.
and our sense of safety. And so what happens then is there will inevitably something that our partner does that will affect one or both of those things. And
Hmm.
that then creates a reaction. So when we think about inheritance being such a big thing and relationships getting into fights, that at the heart of it is how much was I worth to them? Like,
Yeah.
is this the meaning? Like, oh my gosh, and I did all these things and this is all that I got while this other person got that. It's affected my sense of worth, right? So it's really starting at that and going and noticing, okay, so when my spouse does this and it affects me in this way, what is that really about? And then communicating that need in in a time and place where we're not being reactive.
Right.
Because we often don't talk about it, and then those emotions get overwhelming, and then we get impulsive, right? And we might impulsively spend or do something, or we might impulsively say something in the heat of the moment. Whereas we want to go, whoa, okay, that really upset me. Gosh, what was that about?
Right.
I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to sit with this for a bit and then talk to that person. So, as an example, I've worked with a couple where and look, this will often happen. You might have had same or similar childhood experiences. You might have both come from poverty, but you would have taken away two different sets of meanings and responses to that situation. And then the tug of war happens when one person's response is triggering the other person, right? Because you go,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So, for example, I've worked with a couple where, for the lady in particular, money was the way that love was shown growing up.
Okay.
So it was never said through words, there was never physical affection, but money and gifts were how she felt loved. So in her relationship, she really views, okay, well, I need my spouse to buy me gifts and surprises on a regular basis, and that is how then I'm going to feel loved.
Right.
Now, if her spouse is not aware of that, he then each time he tries to set a budget, his pressure is I have to provide for us. I'm trying to show love through providing and through protecting, but he's triggering her because he's withholding a gift. So in her mind, her interpretation is he loves money more than me. These things are more important than what I am. Not at all the case. He's trying really hard to show love in the way that he was taught, as far as offering that protection and safety and security. So unless the two of them have that conversation, they'll continue to live in their little silos of each interpreting each other's behaviors, misinterpreting them, and then responding in that way. And that then creates that greater divide. So we have to start with compassion. We have to go, okay, that's the story that I took. This person behaved because of this.
Hmm.
Let me actually step away from it and get curious and go, how come this is so important to you? What is it about that to you? And then you'll start to fall on the same page. So, yeah, so in the case of the lady where gifts were really important to her, we sort of discussed and said, okay, well, that can also be unsustainable because also part of that element was the element of surprise. If you're now
Hmm.
expecting that every day, then that's also going to lose its effect. What are other ways that the two of you can reconnect emotionally? What
Hmm.
are other ways that you can show love? And that becomes really important too, because going on a financial journey together, setting goals, doing anything together is going to involve compromise.
Right.
You're not going to get there while you don't feel like you're on the same team.
That's right. Yeah.
You have to start from the beginning, reconnect, bond again, start to feel like you actually care about each other. Then we recommence these conversations around what does this mean for you? Why is this goal so important to you? What worries you about this? How can we then do this together?
And tell me if I'm right or wrong here. I find that some people have the best of intentions regarding that protecting the other person from money stress, so they just won't tell the other spouse about something. One of the first pieces of marital advice from an older woman I ever got was hide money. And it was like, well, that's okay. I guess that's generational. It was strange to me. It's like, why would I do that? But the instinct does come up when things get tough and you're feeling criticized for a purchase. If you happen to be not the higher income earner, or there's a power struggle, or you are the higher income earner and you don't want to worry the other partner. These are well-meaning things or they're self-defensive things, but they can still cause real problems, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, again, your behaviors, you'll show that stress in other ways as
Right.
well, and it'll start to spill over. But at the end of the day, it's then about trust, right? So it's then going, the other person's going to eventually react and go, well, you didn't trust me to be there for you. You didn't trust me not to judge you. You didn't trust me to, I didn't have a chance to respond and be supportive, right? So that then can become a really hard sort of event to recover from, right? To
Yeah.
start to
Yeah.
then regain each other's trust and do that. But also, a lot of people will do it because there's such a sense of shame of,
Yeah.
I have let people down, or they're going to think this
That's
of
right.
me, and I don't want them to think less of me for having done this.
Yeah.
But again, it has to start with that self-compassion, with understanding that these events took place for a reason and that you were doing the best that you could with the tools that you had and the
Yeah.
knowledge that you had. And now let's go. Now, you touched on as well as far as women sort of being advised to hide money. So it is that catch-22 of looking at how do we, particularly as women, if we are financially dependent on our spouses, how do we protect ourselves against domestic violence and financial abuse and all those sorts of things.
Hmm.
So I agree that we need to maintain access to our own money and maintain access to our capacity to earn money.
But that's
But
not the
keeping
same as
that
hiding it. Yeah.
that's the thing. Keeping it
Right.
separate versus hiding its existence altogether are two different things. So
That's
if
right.
you notice that there's something in your relationship where your gut instinct is saying that I need to keep this a secret, that's a flag for you that there's something else going on in the relationship too,
Hmm.
right? That there's bigger things there at play apart from just where that money is sitting that need to be addressed one way or another.
Yeah, and I mean that's true not just in marriages, right, or romantic relationships, it's true in families as well, right? If you've hit a point in your family where someone's saying you're out of the will and that becomes this leverage point, that's the sign of much deeper problems, and that can be absolutely crushing for people to find out their family wasn't what it was at the time. I mean, if you're talking about a will, it means that somebody probably doesn't have a lot of years left. So, in instances like that, where it is a crisis, something's gone wrong, you're in it, now what? What do you recommend for people when they find themselves in spots like that?
Yeah, well, I guess we're looking at it from the point of view of what is then the outcome that we're seeking, really. So, I think especially as far as wills, it's such a topic that everyone feels so uncomfortable about and is so emotionally charged that families often don't discuss it up front.
Yeah.
And then it's left to be dealt with later. Then it starts to create a rift because everyone's making assumptions as to why it played out in the way that it did. So, my advice to families, wherever possible, is have these conversations up front. Let them know and go, look, for these reasons, we're wanting to do X, Y, and Z, and this will go to this person, this will go to that person. And if need be, maybe we need to have a family therapy session. Maybe we need to have someone in the room to support and facilitate those conversations.
Hmm.
But as much as that can seem like a cost now, it's far more cost effective to do that now and resolve it than to be tied up in the courts later trying to argue over, well, this decision needs to be reversed and this outcome wasn't right. So again, all of it comes back to that having that open conversation, but that requires vulnerability. And we've just seen money is so closely tied to our sense of self-worth. So it becomes really tricky for people to be able to do that successfully. But I think, as a stepping stone, it can be worthwhile getting a family therapist in the room and having that conversation there.
It also comes from experience too. If you don't have experience with those large sums of money the first time you go through it, you make a lot of mistakes. I mean, the first time you get that bill from the probate lawyer because you called them 20 times and they billed you for every single call, you're not going to do that again. You're going to sit and wait and just let the process work, right?
Yeah.
But these are intergenerational things where if you grow up in a family with an understanding of that kind of money, you have some guidance as opposed to people who grew up, say, in poverty or even lower middle class. There was just nothing but debt to inherit that you don't know what you don't know. So for
Mm.
people going, I don't even know where to begin. I didn't come from anything. I've done well for myself, but I think I can do better. what, how does someone identify negative patterns, that they don't know about and build sort of the confidence that they are making the right choice?
Mm. So I think all of that stems from starting to create goals with intention, not just around, look, I want to buy a property or I want to pay off debt, but looking beyond that to go, what type of a lifestyle am I trying to create? The more specific we can be around what it is we're trying to do and why, then the plan kind of falls out from that, right? And then the confidence comes because at the moment we live at the age of information. There's too much information.
Yeah.
There's too many voices. Wherever you go, everyone will have an opinion. And then we go into online forums and social media groups. And now there's a million people you don't know saying you should do this and you should do that.
Mhm.
That really starts to then erode your confidence because you don't know what was the right move.
Right.
So the answer is there is no cookie cutter approach. There is no best move. It's around what is it that you want that is going to bring you joy. So coming back to that whole running your own race, getting as specific as you can about what you're wanting to achieve, the time frame you want to achieve it in, then you start to break down how much money do I need to do that? And then notice if you're getting into a problem solving mindset or if you're getting into a sort of putting yourself into a victim state mindset where I'm just saying, it's not going to work because of this reason or this reason or this reason. That already there, without you doing a lot of self-discovery, will flag for you what's my biggest challenge is I'm focused on what could go wrong, not what is within my control to change and what could go right. So if that's the case, then that is where I start with building my confidence and focusing on that and saying, okay, well, right now, sure, these are all problems and obstacles. Let me pick one of them and say, what support is available to me to overcome it? What is within my control that I can do to go and overcome it? And then start to work that way.
Last question tied into that. If somebody's got a disconnect between sort of those aspirations, I always wanted to own a home, for instance, right? And a lifestyle that it doesn't make sense to own a home if you're going to be moving every year. You're just going to be losing money on every closing cost, right? So, how does somebody get out of this idea of successful people own a home when your success is taking you in another way?
Yeah. And look, and that is, I feel like it's a common myth that's emerged. And we have a saying here, rent money is dead money and all of that. Where in actual fact, most of the financially successful people I know actually rent because as you just said, there's that cost to buying and selling each time, especially if it's happening frequently.
Yeah.
That is money that you could be putting towards starting a business,
Yeah.
investing, doing other goals that'll get you to where you want to go.
Yeah.
So if the disconnect is there, is just getting curious again around what is it about that home ownership that is so significant to me? Is it about security? Is it about what a particular person is going to think when they find out that I own the home? Like, what is it about that? And really starting to, again, I use the word curiosity a lot, but just really getting to know what is sitting behind that thought process. Because otherwise, if you don't address that need, and that can be other ways to address that need of safety
Hmm.
or of success or perception, but if you don't address that need, you will impulsively, when that feeling gets too overwhelming, you will impulsively go and buy the next home and then sell it. And you'll keep yourself stuck in that cycle, which is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy of the story of I don't deserve it, right? So I'm
Yeah.
just going to keep myself in that loop. So we want to bust that wide open and then you start to run your own race.
Yeah. I live in an area where a whole bunch of people moved out at the beginning of COVID because it's semi-rural. And then, 2 years later, sold and moved back, and they just set 10 grand on fire both ends. We were all sitting around going, but it obviously fulfilled some sort of need, right? It was so imperative they couldn't stop and think. Natasha Janssens, a finance expert, women with sense. It's women.withsense.com. Natasha
.com.au.
.com.au because you're from Australia, and the wonderful title Wonder Woman's Guide to Money, the Busy Woman's Guide to Money Management and Wealth Building. If you go to the Women with Sense website, womenwithsense.com.au, there is a quiz you can fill out to find out what your attachment style with money is. It's super cool. Natasha, thank you so much for coming on It's Not Therapy. Have I missed anything about the way people can find you and more what you're about?
No, you've covered it all. So thank you so much for having me. I've really had fun and really enjoyed this conversation.
Great. And I did like that on your blog, the top 5 mistakes that people make with money overlap very nicely with the top 10 phrases on this programs, including healthy goals based on things you can control. So, Natasha, thanks so much for your time.
No, absolute pleasure.
When we come back, some of the things I've found really, really help with overcoming that avoidant, icky money trauma. Questions, comments, concerns. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. At nottherapyshow is the socials. Back for a final segment after this. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana. I'm still not a therapist. We've got an ample amount of time this show. Woohoo! Timing for a change. Talking about money trauma, money stress, how to work with it. I hesitate to say overcome it because it is a work in progress. So as I said before the break, I'm going to tell you some of the things that have helped me. One is set financial boundaries. Top 10 phrase. Other people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. The problem is a lot of people do not respect other people's financial boundaries, and they always have their reasons. But if someone is invading your money space, that's a problem. That doesn't mean you have to do everything on your own. If somebody is helping instead of forcing, that's awesome. But if you have, only a vague idea of what a financial boundary even means, that is something to look into and possibly even, like I said, get some financial advice from a qualified expert, because that's very, very important. Because if you can't have financial boundaries, then the next part, the next bit I found really, really useful is kind of impossible, because the next thing is set goals. I say top 10 phrase, healthy goals are based on things you can control. You may think this is just setting yourself up for disappointment, the idea of setting financial goals. I have seen the cost of housing. It is still yikes. They say, the cost of condos is going down. We've got lots of inventory. Yeah, it hasn't gone down that much. I don't care what anybody has said. And at least they're posting the condo fees now. But I saw a condo listed where somebody I knew used to live, and the condo fees, the fees were $1,000 a month. That's without your mortgage. Yikes. What? Yeah, okay. But setting goals, then assessing whether they're achievable, then adapting as needed. This is good. This is important. This gives you a sense of direction and meaning and purpose in your life. And we know these things are directly tied to happiness. If you are just marking time, if you are just going day to day, if you don't have goals, you don't know if you're going in the right direction or the wrong one. So the idea of goal setting may stress you out, and it may take a few tries. Wow, I really ooted there. Apologies to those outside of Canada. Maybe not. Why am I apologizing? We're proud of our ootin' about Canada. Anyway, adjusting the goals, setting it, trying it out, resetting, getting calibrated. Super, super, super important to feeling fulfilled and having a sense of worth. And this is where we get into a big one that's hard. Watch for signs of avoidance. You know that thing where you just don't want to look because you're afraid of what you're going to see? I've been there. I'm still there sometimes. Seek support sooner rather than later. People do this stuff for a living. Don't just let it sit and fester. If you address it now, it's gonna be a much more solvable problem than if you wait. Top 10 phrase, ignoring negatives isn't being positive, right? Having the rose-colored glasses on when it comes to the green, not a good idea. You ever seen a mix of green and pink? It becomes this kind of like poop color. Anyway, moving on. You don't need to hear. This whole concept is poop for some people, right? Right. Okay. So here's one. It's simple, but man, it really added up for me. Set up an automatic withdrawal every month into a tax-free savings account. It doesn't have to be a lot. The point is it's automatic, right? It just comes out. You don't even have to think about it. It really adds up. You know, even if you put away $10 a month, that's $120 a year. $100 a month works really well because you save like $1,200 a year, right? When you have that just sitting there, you're not thinking about it, and suddenly you have that emergency repair, your car breaking down, you need a new car. You've got that savings to draw from, and you get some tax benefits if it's in your tax-free savings account, right? But I don't have any money. You can spare $10. No, really, you can. Walk once, take one less Uber, right? You can do $10 a month. And start there, even do $5 a month just to start, because you can always increase the amount. But getting into that passive habit, it's a really good step. And then this is something I found. And this is probably going to be the most unpopular thing I say, but don't get hung up on finding the best deal. Set a price in your head that you feel is good. And once you find it, stop agonizing, make the purchase. Because chasing bargains, I have seen people, they drive all over the place, they pay for parking, they do all this stuff, and they end up spending, I mean, what's a tank of gas, right? What's a week of your time worth? Chasing bargains can often mean spending more than you realize, having a lot of stress, and there are often hidden charges to great deals. You should get a ballpark of what's reasonable for something to cost, and often the cheapest thing isn't the best value. And ultimately, that's what you're looking for, right? Value. Invest in things that are timeless pieces. They're going to last a while. So spend a little bit more on that furniture so it's a forever piece. Same with clothes. Buy quality stuff that is timeless, isn't gonna go out of style because it's been in style for ages, you know, especially shoes. Spend the money on quality shoes. You will not regret it. It's worth it spending the money so that your feet don't hurt. If it hurts, it's not good value. But yeah, it takes time to not panic and spend with your head instead of your freeze, fight, fawn, or flight response. Speaking of flight, I gotta run. We are out of time. Questions, comments, concerns, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Nottherapyshow.com is the website, at nottherapyshow on social medias. I was too loud there. You crazy's only problem if it's hurting you. Talk next time.